Hello, it's Miss Messick. Welcome to week 4. Are we in week 4 or week 3? Welcome to a brand new week. Happy Tuesday. First, some in quarantine, time doesn't matter. Time is irrelevant. All time has disappeared in quarantine. But anyways, it is Tuesday, October 13th. First of all, some class business. Let me apologize for not posting last weekend. This week I tried to post lectures on Monday, so forgive me for that. I may just make the lecture day Tuesday. I may just post lectures Tuesday from now. I try and get all the materials up at the beginning of the week. I have not done that last week. I have not done that this week. Up until this week, I have posted your discussion form on time, but I did not yesterday. And so as soon as I finish this lecture, the video, and post it, I'll post your discussion board. I'll give you till Saturday to complete that. Okay, so you get an extra day to complete your discussion form this week because I was a day late posting it. Also, remember, you've got your close reading, which is due Friday. Tuesday is the 13th today. Let me look at my calendar. So Friday's the 16th. That's right, the 16th. So remember that you have your paper due at midnight on the 16th, and I'll give you until midnight on the 17th to finish your discussion forum for this week. So that's a little bit of business. I'm a little bit terrible at sticking to a schedule. So that's my fault. Everything's going to be a day late as far as your discussion forum is concerned. Everything else is on schedule. Okay. Quick reminder that you will not email me anything. You will upload your close reading to Blackboard. And what you'll do is, if you've looked at the rubric and the prompt, then you've already clicked on assignments, and so you're already halfway there to submitting. You'll click on assignments, then you'll click on the title. It'll say close reading, right? You'll click on the title, and it will take you to a screen where all you need to do is click to browse your computer, attach the file, and click submit. Okay, that's all you'll have to do. I'll send instructions in an email, but I'm thinking most of you have probably used Blackboard before to submit assignments. So if you can attach a document to an email, then you can upload your assignment via Blackboard. So it should be really, really easy. Now, once again, in our introduction video, I mentioned that Blackboard does not accept and will not let me open files done in Pages with a Mac, or Google Docs. Any kind of file other than, those are the major ones that I get. Any kind of file other than Microsoft Word or PDF, I cannot open. So either convert it online with the resources that I gave you in the email at the beginning of the semester, or just use Microsoft Word, okay? So if you use some other word processing, then you will have to convert it. If you just love Pages or you just love Google Docs, you'll have to convert it to Microsoft Word or PDF, okay? Using those resources that I gave you and that I sent you in an email at the beginning of the semester. However, you do have free access to Microsoft Office 365, okay? And I sent you that link too. Through Harper, you've got free access. So you've got a free download of Microsoft Word. You don't have to pay for Microsoft Word. So there's no excuse why you can't upload it and convert it to Microsoft Word, or use Microsoft Word to start with, okay? Just another reminder. Every semester, I have a few students where I have to email them and tell them, I can't open your file. I really want to give you a grade. I see that you've uploaded a document on time, but I cannot read it, okay? So, and I don't want to have to convert the file. That should be your job to convert it before you upload it. So, make sure that your file is in Microsoft Word or PDF format when you upload it, okay? If you have any problems uploading to Blackboard, let me know. I know technology is hard to figure out sometimes. And maybe you have not submitted via Blackboard and are not familiar with Blackboard. If you have any problems with submitting for whatever reason, or cannot get it converted to the right file, any technological problems you run into at all, let me know. Last resort, I will allow students to email me their paper. However, this is an excuse on my part. I really am making excuses, and this is not a legitimate excuse. But I do want to let you guys know that I flag the emails when students send me papers via email, but I get, 10, 20, 30 emails a day, and students' emails sometimes get kind of buried. Not lost, they're there. I don't delete anything from my inbox. But they get kind of lost. And I will tell you that I grade everything that's uploaded in Blackboard first. So if you want your grade on time, if you want yours to be graded first, if it's there in Blackboard, I'll see it and grade it first, okay? So try to avoid, if you can, sending it to my email, because it is difficult for me to keep up with documents, with student papers that way, okay? And you'll get your grade faster if it's just uploaded in Blackboard, where I can see it where it should be and where I enter grades, okay? All right. Hopefully you all have your books now. That should be good to go. Should have been enough time to ship. I hope that's all working out fine. Haven't had any recent emails about problems, so that's good. Okay, so on for the lesson today. Today, I want to, this will help you with, as you're working on your critical reading assignment, your close reading, which is really a critical reading. Your close reading, I want to talk about more blocks to critical thinking. This really is, as much as a writing class, a critical thinking class, which are skills that you'll use for the rest of your life in whatever line of work you go into, right? So let's go ahead and get started right away. Blocks to critical thinking. The first is cultural conditioning and egocentric thinking. All right. And I want to go over these, but I want to preface this lecture by saying that every time that you read material for this class, or in general at all, you want to be looking for these biases, right? That is how we get to what the truth is to be able to eliminate and recognize these biases. So these blocks to critical thinking, knowing them will help you point out which ones you struggle with and which ones you see pop up in writings that you read as you're trying to determine, can I trust this author, right? So every author has biases, and it's not inherently bad or, terrible. It's just by virtue of us having different experiences, we have biases. Our experiences have conditioned us that way. So look for the author's biases and their blocks to critical thinking, and examine your own as well, okay? Okay, so back to our first block to critical thinking. Cultural conditioning and egocentric thinking. So our cultural backgrounds influence what values and beliefs we adopt and hold and are taught, right? Culture and conditioning refers to the process by which society's attitudes and values are passed on to its members. Although the precise nature of cultural conditioning, including the lasting effects that it has, are uncertain, what's not uncertain is that cultural conditioning affects all of us, right? In other words, we are all, to a large extent, a product of a particular time and place and culture in which we were raised, okay? We've been significantly shaped by customary beliefs and the cultural setting that we are a part of, that we belong to, that we are placed in, that we grew up in, all right? For example, by virtue of being American, we have certain American cultural beliefs. That is individuality. Individuality, if we were asked to describe American values, individuality is pretty up there, high up there, as a attitude that Americans favor and hold strongly. Likewise, the American dream, that by sheer hard work we can become successful and we can do anything that we want to do. So those are cultural assumptions that we have inherited by virtue of being American and being a product of American culture. That now beliefs and values that stem from our cultural background as Americans. And that's just an example. I'm not assuming that all of you in this class are American, right? So that's just an example from my frame of reference, okay? That I can speak about easily and know more about. So beliefs and values that might arise from our American cultural frame of reference are that communism and socialism are evil because we do value individualism so much and hard work so much, right? Very few other countries have a work week that is 50 hours, like America does. So, okay. Capitalism is the best economic system ever devised. We do value hard work, and a part of that is our belief in capitalistic values being raised in American culture. Another that might stem from this belief in individualism and another value that might stem from our American cultural background is that the two-party format is the best way to structure a political system, because it is the way the American political system is structured. Okay, so those are a few examples of beliefs that we might have inherited by virtue of our American cultural background. Okay. Egocentric thinking. This is simply the tendency to think about what benefits us first, and that everything else that does not benefit us is not good, right? So egocentric thinking comes from the unfortunate facts that humans do not naturally, instinctually, initially, unless they are asked to or stop to think about it, consider the rights and needs of others. They consider their own rights and needs first. And this is egocentric thinking. Nor do we naturally appreciate the point of views of others that differ from our own, right? We have to consider those other points of views that differ from our own, and often we only do it reluctantly. Okay, so this is egocentric thinking. And it can lead to some critical blocks. Some blocks to critical thinking and critical analysis can get in the way of critical analysis. And that it leads to attitudes like, it's true because I believe it, which is innate egocentrism. I assume that what I believe is true, even though I've never questioned it, and even though I've been given evidence to the contrary. It's true because we believe it, innate sociocentrism. I assume that the dominant beliefs of my culture are correct and right and the best, even though I have not questioned the basis of these beliefs, and even though I've been giving factual evidence to the contrary. It's true because I want to believe it. Innate wish fulfillment. So, for example, whatever puts us in a good light, we want to believe, even though we might have been given evidence to the contrary, factual evidence to the contrary, right? It's true because I have always believed it. You innately want to validate your beliefs. You want to find reasons to back them up, and you want to, just by virtue of being human nature, you want to sort of push aside, not maybe intentionally ignore, but push aside evidence that does not confirm and validate your beliefs. Especially because if we have held them for so long, we have an investment. Our entire way of looking at the world might be founded on these beliefs. And so we want to validate them, or else we have to admit that maybe our worldview is flawed. Okay? So that is innate self-validation. Innate self-validation. It's true because I've always believed it. It's true because it is in my best self-interest to believe it. What benefits me must be true. What benefits others and doesn't benefit me must be wrong. Okay? Any belief that justifies you having more power, more money, more anything that benefits you. Okay? Despite factual evidence to the contrary. Okay. Reliance on authority. Authority is an expert outside ourselves. You all know that. They can be an expert individual, parent, teacher, celebrity, clergy member, president, any other public figure, a group of individuals, doctors, educators, lawyers, or, church authorities. The list of authorities and topics that they can be an authority on is endless, right? Without relying on authority, we would know very little about our world and very little of what we ordinarily take for granted, right? So, but there's a danger by relying solely on authority, on one authority. It's good to rely on authority, but relying solely on one authority can block successful critical thinking, can block critical analysis. When we rely so much on authority that we stop thinking for ourselves. All of those authorities, though they have more knowledge than we do, are still people and can still get it wrong. And so we have to still examine what they are saying and examine their claims and consult other authorities to back up what we're being told. Okay? We stop thinking for ourselves when we rely too much on our authority and on other authorities and allow other authorities to make really important decisions for us. When we're dealing with a controversial issue, we might go with what the majority thinks, because even the majority sometimes can be an authority. But the majority of people don't know much about any one given subject, right? But we consider the majority an authority sometimes. Most people think this about this issue, and so most people must be right? But that is a flaw in critical thinking, to believe that and to operate by that basis, okay? Authorities can be very, very influential and sometimes negatively so. All right. Black and white thinking. This is very much what I want to try. What I'm looking for in your essays is that you don't rely on black and white thinking. I have had students in the past write argumentative papers about subjects. And one year I gave them a choice of a few subjects, and one of the subjects was GMOs. This is just an example. And all the papers that I got were GMOs are good or GMOs are bad, right? Now that is very much black and white thinking. When we all understand that most of life occurs in the gray area, especially when we're talking about arguments, absolute arguments, there's very rarely enough evidence to support absolute arguments that are all either good or all either bad. So the fact is that GMOs are neither good nor bad, but they're beneficial and detrimental in different ways, right? This is avoiding black and white thinking. So we want to avoid black and white thinking, which is the tendency for us as human beings to place issues into categories, to split them into either or, instead of really dealing with the complex gray area, the kind of sub-issues that we need to deal with to really be able to look at the issue as a whole. We like to place things into categories because it is easier for our brains to process and to work through if we've got two categories. And that's, probably why we have a two-party system, is because it's easier for our brains to understand this party is this way, this party is that way, instead of having multiple groups that each stand for several different things, which gets complicated, right? So even our two-party system represents black and white thinking, liberal, conservative, right? But we know that there's a whole range of political affiliations in between in that gray area, okay? So that's one example. Years ago, you all might be too young to remember this, but around 9/11, around September 11th, George Bush famously said, and I always use this as an example of black and white thinking, you're either with us or you're a terrorist. So that leaves no possibility for disagreeing with American policies and not being a terrorist. If you disagree with American policies in any way, then you are completely on the side of the terrorists. And we can see how this black and white thinking is irrational and illogical and blocks critical thinking that could really work to solve the issue, specifically in this instance being terrorism. But he gave this speech after 9/11 to really boost the morale of American citizens who were very shocked by this tragic event and this terrorist attack. Okay, of course we know that's not true. You can disagree with the way that America handled 9/11 and absolutely not be on the side of the terrorists, right? But he famously said, you're either with us or you're a terrorist. A person is either some other examples of this kind of black and white thinking. If you don't like it, if you don't like this country, you can get out. America, love it or leave it. There's only two ways. You can not disagree with America and stay here. You can't be critical of America and stay here. That's black and white thinking. And we see how that is really harmful. And if not overtly harmful, it at least blocks the possibility for coming to a solution between maybe opposing viewpoints, right? It blocks critical thinking. Okay. Several factors account for black and white thinking, and one is the human drive for certainty. Now, a lot of the issues we'll tackle in class, you'll read these articles and you will be uncertain how you feel about it. And the semester may end and you still may be uncertain how you feel about a certain issue that some of these articles raise. And that's okay. But our human minds want certainty. They want discrete categories that are separate and clearly defined. Our brains like that, right? And we stand a far better chance of attaining certainty, resolving at a certain, coming to a certain resolution regarding any issue, if we can, then if we don't consider the complexities of the issue. It's easier for to be certain about something when we don't consider the complexities of it. So in your essays, I'm looking for that complex critical thinking that really considers the complexities of any issue. It's a complex issue that Sue is taking up in this article that I'm asking you to look at, a paragraph of, for this first assignment. The end of white America. A very complex issue, very contentious issue, right? Has to do with race, has to do with culture, has to do with American culture, white culture, has to do with minority culture. Lots of complex variables there, right? So I want to see that you're not speaking in terms of good or bad, but more nuanced, and that you're dealing with the complexities of the issue. Very complex issue. Okay. Another problem that we fall into is that our language, the English language, is set up, we speak in opposites. We speak in opposites. So there's liberal, conservative, black, white. Everything is dialectical rather than on a scale. The English language is set up where something is defined by what it is not, by its opposite. And that, the way the English language is set up, perpetuates and encourages that dualistic black and white thinking, that there are only two sides. And I want you to think of it more in terms of there are as many sides as there are people on this planet. Anyone could have any number of positions toward a certain issue. Okay? Okay. Now, limited frame of reference. We all have a limited frame of reference because of where we grew up, our age, our gender, all of those factors that influence our values and beliefs also limit our reference in a way. Because we can't be all genders, we can't be all races, we can't have come from all countries. So all of those things, as much as they influence and shape our beliefs, limit them in some way as well. Okay, so limited frame of reference, and this is not bad. All of us have to deal with this because all of us only have so much experience to draw from. But I want you to recognize it as something that could potentially bias you when speaking about any given subject. And I want you to think about, look back at this list after you listen to this lecture and think about which one of these you struggle with the most overcoming. and work to overcome it this semester. Okay. So we got our own limited frame of reference, which means we've got our own body of accumulated knowledge that only goes so far, right? Only goes so far, that we rely on to interpret new situations, new information, and to guide our behavior, all right? So we can only act within that frame of reference, right? That's why this class is designed to broaden that frame of reference, okay? All right, so those are some blocks to critical thinking. We'll go over a few more here before I move on to our next topic for today. All right. So misunderstanding. Misunderstanding can arise due to language or cultural difference, a lack of awareness in processes involved, and a misunderstanding that critical thinking means negative. That critical is a negative word here. Critical simply means examining to discover the most information about any given topic that you can. If you're not thinking critically about a topic, then you're not gaining all the information that you can about that topic, right? And not coming to the truth. I think being critical to arrive at the truth is a very positive thing. And so I associate critical thinking with arriving at the truth, which I think is a very noble calling and a very positive thing, not negative. Reluctance to critique. No one wants to be told that they're wrong. No one wants to admit that they're wrong. No one wants to apologize for being wrong. That's just because we're humans. We don't like to have to do that. So all of us are sort of reluctant to critique because we want to be right. We all have a certain amount of pride, right? We want to think that we're good at something. So because of that, we are reluctant naturally to consider alternative views when we have come to the conclusion that we're right. Lack of detailed knowledge can really block critical thinking depending on a subject. And that, again, is through no fault of our own. We only have so much knowledge to work with. So if you do find that you're biased because you have a lack of detailed knowledge, then, go and seek out some knowledge from others who know more about it, okay? Now, being aware of these pitfalls is the most important thing to avoid falling into them. And I want to see in your close reading papers that you're avoiding falling into these pitfalls, okay? Now, knowing these biases and these blocks to critical thinking can help you avoid them even in this first paper, okay? So, some things to be aware of. Over-reliance on feelings or emotions. You've been told not to use I in your writing in school since, first grade or so, because it's not objective. And in our writing, we just want facts. We want to seem objective. We want facts and we want to seem objective. So you've been told to keep the word I out of it. And that's so that we don't appear as though we're relying too much on our own thoughts and feelings and emotions, but rather on hard factual evidence. Self-centered, societal, cultural-centered thinking, conformism, dogma, or peer pressure. You want to avoid that kind of thinking. You want to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, understand why they're coming from the position that they are coming from, why they hold the values and beliefs that they do, and question your own values and beliefs at the same time. Unconscious bias or selective perception, an inability to be receptive to an idea or point of view that differs from yours, closed-mindedness. I really want to discourage that here. That's a number one block to critical thinking. Unwarranted assumptions or lack of relevant information, especially when it comes to politics. People like to make claims that they have not warranted, that they have not done enough research on. and not collected enough sources to validate. I want to kind of normalize, especially in this class, saying, and I say it all the time, unless it comes to literature, which I, would consider myself an expert in. But whatever you don't consider yourself an expert in, normalize saying, I don't have enough information to form an opinion yet about this topic, instead of throwing a misinformed viewpoint out there, right? Okay, fear of being wrong, poor communication skills or apathy. Sometimes it's a topic we just really don't care about, and you might not really care about the topic that this first article is that you're doing your assignment over is speaking about. You might not care what Sue's speaking about, but then try to figure out why the author feels that it should matter to you. If it doesn't matter to you, if you are apathetic about the issue, why does the author believe that it should matter to you? Okay? All right. So I want you to be thinking, especially now at this time, we've got this election coming up. How can you communicate with those who do not actively engage with critical thinking and are unwilling to engage in meaningful conversation to arrive at a common ground? How would you react or respond when your lack of experience, when you experience a lack of critical thinking in the media, amongst your own family members, at work, or among your other classmates even, right? Okay. Some other questions to ask yourself when examining a text. So you might want to sort of write the answers down to these questions about the paragraph that you're examining for this paper Friday. What assumptions, what examined beliefs, number one, does the writer's argument presuppose? The writer is assuming that you hold certain beliefs. For the end of white culture, she's assuming that you hold the belief that white culture exists, that it is a thing, right? If you don't, then her argument might not really be very effective. Okay. Are these assumptions explicit or implicit? Sometimes it's very clear what values the author is defending, and sometimes it's not because they are implicit or hidden, right? And you need to uncover them and speak to them. Are these assumptions important to the author's argument or only incidental? Does the author give any evidence of being aware of the hidden assumptions in his or her argument? We know that the author, Sue, is not white, right? The author is Asian. And so that can clue us in to how the author might feel about white people not being a member of the white community, a white person themselves. They're going to have a different experience of culture than white people would. The author would. Do they recognize their bias? Do they recognize their subject positionality? If given assumption or set of, an assumption or a set of them seems to intentionally or implicitly work within within the text, why do you think the writer would make this kind of choice? Why hide the assumption rather than stating it outright? So if you uncover implicit biases, implicit values and beliefs hidden within the work, why would the author not feel the need to communicate them outright? Would a critic be likely to share these assumptions, or are they exactly what a critic would challenge? What sort of evidence would be relevant to supporting or rejecting these assumptions? So what evidence did the author leave out that might contradict or help their claim? Am I willing to grant the author's assumptions? Why or why not? If you're not willing to grant the author's initial set of assumptions, then their argument is not going to be very effective. Right? Okay. So that is another set of questions to ask we listed the blocks to critical thinking. And those are some questions you can ask about a text to make sure that you are thinking critically about it and uncovering the author's bias and examining your own. Okay? Last thing I want to do today is talk about rhetorical devices. Looking forward to your second assignment already a little bit. Semester's going to go by fast. What is a rhetorical device? Rhetorical devices are not completely separate from literary devices, like metaphor and simile, and all of analogies, all of those tools, writing tools, literary devices that you learn to use to make your writing more effective and more interesting. So they're not totally separate from literary devices. A rhetorical device is any language that helps an author or speaker achieve their purpose. Remember, anytime you read anything, you want to understand what the author's purpose is. Come up with a verb, an active verb. What is Sue's purpose? Why speak about white culture? Why now, right? So it's any language that helps them achieve their specific purpose. Now, that's kind of vague, and I'll get more specific. But as the purpose of rhetoric is persuasion, how does their language help persuade the audience? A rhetorical device is an extremely broad term, so we'll get more specific with it. It can include techniques for generating emotion, for generating claims to logic, and claims to ethics, ethos, pathos, and logos, as well as persuade the audience, right? Can make the audience feel, can persuade them. So hyperbole is one. That's pretty common. And it is a word sentence level rhetorical device. I'll just give you an example of some three. And then I will post under course materials in Blackboard a longer list, a couple list with many, many different rhetorical devices. And that will help you understand what rhetorical devices are. Now, no list is going to be complete, right? There are others that won't be on the list, but some of them you'll be pretty familiar with already, having learned them in middle school and high school. But look over these lists, glance over them at least, browse through them, remind yourself of at least some of the main ones, and read the definitions to remind yourself of some of these main ones so that you can begin to use them in your own writing and be able to identify them in another writer's writing. So what I really want you to do is be able to identify the author's rhetorical devices that they're using so you can speak about whether that rhetorical device was the right rhetorical device to choose for that particular situation, that particular topic, for that particular audience. Okay, that's eventually the goal we're building up to. The first step would be identifying the rhetorical devices that the author uses to appeal to their audience. Okay? All right, so hyperbole is one. And hyperbole is an exaggeration for dramatic effect. Berlin was flattened during the bombing. The city was not literally flattened. That's an exaggeration. But it gets the point across that there was extensive damage done. So think about some reasons why an author might use hyperbole and what effect hyperbole would have on the audience. Okay? Number two is one you're familiar with, especially if you've taken the SAT, which a lot of colleges are getting rid of for their entrance exams. Analogy is an important device that explains one thing by comparing it to another. And this is also at the sentence level. A lot of these three examples, these first two examples happen at the sentence level, okay? But an analogy is in a comparison, which this is just a reminder. You all know what an analogy is, but it's a comparison. My cat's fur is as white as a cloud. Analogies can also function, though, at much higher levels, including paragraphs and whole essays, okay? An entire essay can be an analogy. For example, you might argue against war by drawing an extended analogy between the war on terrorism, 9/11, and World War II. And that could be an entire essay. And the entire essay is one long analogy between the fight on terrorism and World War II. Okay? The success of the whole argument there would depend on how well you persuade readers to accept that analogy. Is this analogy between the war on terrorism and World War II similar enough that it's effective? Or are the two historical instances, too different, right? You have to persuade your audience that these situations are closely enough related that there is an analogy there that can bring to light some information, help us think critically about the war on terrorism, okay? All right. Example 3, the counter-argument. Every good argument addresses the counter-argument effectively and thinks about every author that addresses the counter-argument will do so in a way that shows they have thought about the objections that someone could raise to their argument, points that contrast and might contradict their claim. Bringing them up in your own argument and refuting them logically is the most effective way to argue. So the counter-argument. The counter-argument is a very important rhetorical device for any kind of essay, any kind of argumentative writing. It is a response to your own view that opposes your view. So if you argue in favor for an idea, the counter-argument is the argument for the idea that's the opposite of your idea that you're arguing for, that goes against your own idea. In order to make your own argument, convey your own perspective, you have to acknowledge, analyze, and answer the counter-arguments first, okay? Now, another important thing I want you to recognize is that rhetorical devices work on the word level, sentence level, paragraph level, and structural level. Even paragraph structure is rhetorical. Whether you choose 2 or 3 paragraphs for your body paragraphs is rhetorical and will have an effect on the audience, okay? So, word level. Rhetorical devices work on the word level. Metonym is an example of a rhetorical device that works on the word level. It's a rhetorical device in which a part stands for the whole, meaning the crown can stand for the entire country. The word crown is often substituted when the speaker really means country, okay? At least in countries where there are sole royalty, okay? Metonym. A part stands for the whole. Sentence level. Rhetorical devices also operate at the sentence level. They affect the meaning of a sentence or they affect the meaning of a sentence. For example, parallelism. Parallelism is an important rhetorical device in which different parts of a sentence have the same grammatical structure. And that helps our brain process the information in those two sentences effectively and in the same way. It also demonstrates the similarity between the two ideas when they are structured in the same way in 2 sentences. Okay? I am disgusted by your methods, but impressed by your results. The way that both of those sentences are structured the same gets the idea across and juxtaposes the 2 different ideas in the 2 different sentences by making them equal. Okay? Structured equally. Each sentence gets the same weight. Okay? All right. Paragraph level. Rhetorical devices also work at the paragraph level. At the paragraph level, rhetorical devices, rhetorical techniques are especially important. They help signal the structure of the argument. And remember, structure is rhetorical too, because the structure of your argument communicates information and can affect how your audience receives the message, whether you're successful or not. Because if it's not structured, it'll be unclear, and then your audience won't understand it. So in that way, structure is rhetorical. So paragraph level, topic sentences are one way you structure a paragraph. Not the only way, but one way. And so topic sentences are a rhetorical device at the paragraph level. And even in the overall structural level, the 5-paragraph essay that you were taught, introduction, body paragraph 1, 2, and 3, and then conclusion, is also rhetorical because it affects the way your audience understands your message, okay? So, in that way, rhetorical devices work at the structural level. So it's important to understand that rhetorical devices can be implemented, can be employed, used at the word level, sentence level, paragraph level, and structural level. Okay, that's it. That's all I have for today, for this week. Be sure to finish this week's blog post and be sure to, or discussion board post, be sure to turn in your paper on Friday by midnight, the 16th. Upload it to Blackboard, please. Let me know if you have any problems. It's under assignments, then click on the title of the assignment, and there you will click on browse to upload. I forget what the button says, but it's like, click on the button to browse your computer for the file, then click submit, okay? Be sure to do that. You have one extra day to complete your discussion blog post, your discussion board post. And also at the end of, once I finish this video, I will post your discussion forum for this week. You have until Saturday, one extra day. And I will also post course materials, links to information that will help you with this lecture. So a link to lists of rhetorical devices and a link to a list of those critical thinking blocks and skills. Okay. But I will also, very important, post a list of, or not a list, post an example. I found another resource for you all, another link for you all. So I'll post that under close reading that will give you an example of a close reading essay. And we'll break it down so that you can see what the student has done. And it also has a list of steps to write a critical analysis, to write a close reading essay. We already went over those steps, and I've already posted links to resources to help you with that. But this is an extra one that has an example close reading essay that will really be helpful. Okay? That's very similar to what I'm asking you to do. All right? I'm not going to type out the questions for this week's discussion forum because you all have your books. So I'm just going to tell you which questions to answer and on what page they're on. Okay? And I may post links to the articles, but again, those articles should be in your books. You should have your books by now. So you should have access to the questions and the articles already. Okay? All right. I will talk to you next week. Have a great week.